Jessica sat across from Brooke in their usual booth at the Cozy Corner Cafe, a spot so familiar it felt like a second home. As she absent-mindedly stirred her coffee, a faint, almost wistful smile played on her lips, the kind that usually followed one of Brooke's entertaining stories. But today, something was different. There was a distance in Jessica's eyes, as if her thoughts were miles away from the present moment. Brooke caught on immediately. She knew Jessica too well to miss the shift in her demeanor. "Okay, spill it," Brooke said, arching an eyebrow. "What's going on with you and Tyler?" Her tone was light-hearted, even teasing, but there was an unmistakable sharpness in her gaze, a look that told Jessica she wouldn't be able to dodge this one. Jessica sighed, setting her spoon down with a soft clink against the saucer. She hesitated for a moment before finally speaking. "Everything's fine," she muttered, though even to her own ears, the words felt uncertain. "I mean, Tyler's a great husband. We've been together, almost 7 years now." Her voice trailed off as she traced slow, absent-minded circles around the rim of her coffee cup. "But sometimes. I don't know. I can't shake the feeling that something's missing. Like, shouldn't there be more?" Brooke's brow lifted slightly, curiosity flashing across her face. "More?" she repeated, her voice carrying a skeptical edge. "Are we talking about excitement? Passion?" Jessica met her gaze and gave a small nod, her hesitation evident. "Yeah," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "That's exactly it. We're comfortable, and don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. But Tyler seems perfectly content with how things are, and I just feel like I need something else. Something that makes me feel alive again." Brooke's expression shifted, her intrigue deepening. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice as if she were about to share a secret. "You know," she began, a playful glint in her eyes, "I've been trying something new myself. Have you ever thought about opening things up a little? Giving yourself the freedom to see other people?" Jessica's eyes widened, a mix of shock and disbelief flickering across her face. "Wait, you're serious?" she asked, her voice an octave higher than before. Brooke didn't waver. She nodded, completely unfazed. "Absolutely. My husband and I talked about it, and honestly, it's been amazing for us. It doesn't have to be anything extreme, just enough space to breathe. You'd be surprised. Sometimes, it actually brings couples closer." Jessica leaned back, her thoughts racing. A part of her was curious, but another part, one she wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge, felt uneasy. "But how would I even bring something like that up to Tyler?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Brooke's expression softened, but her words remained firm. "You just be honest. This isn't about him, it's about you and what you need. And who knows? He might surprise you. A little change might be exactly what your marriage needs." Jessica took a deep breath, her gaze drifting toward the window as her mind reeled with possibilities. She had no idea that this one conversation would completely alter the way she saw herself, and her marriage. She hesitated before leaning in, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "So, how do I even start that conversation?" Brooke met her eyes with an almost knowing smile. "Honestly? Just be upfront. Men appreciate that more than we think. If you dance around it too much, he'll either get confused or assume something's wrong." Jessica chewed her lip, her forehead creasing with concern. "But what if he thinks I don't love him anymore?" Brooke shook her head. "It's not about loving him less. You're just asking for something that helps you feel like yourself again. If you explain it the right way, he'll understand that it's about personal growth, not that he's done anything wrong." Jessica let out a slow, measured breath, feeling the weight of those words settle over her. "So, I just tell him I want to feel more alive. That this isn't about our relationship, but about me needing something more." Jessica glanced away, uncertainty flickering across her face. But Tyler's never been one for anything outside the norm. He likes things steady. Brooke reached across the table, giving Jessica's hand a reassuring squeeze. If he truly loves you, he'll listen. And if he's willing to hear you out, that's a good sign. It means he's open to working through things, even if the idea is unfamiliar to him. Jessica inhaled deeply, her nerves twisting inside her. More than anything, she hoped Tyler would understand. The following evening, Jessica sat across from Tyler at their dining room table, her heart pounding in her chest. She had played this conversation over in her head 100 times, rehearsing every possible scenario. But now that she was here, the words felt foreign, uncertain, as if they no longer belonged to her. Taking a steadying breath, she finally spoke. "Tyler, there's something I've been thinking about," she said carefully, her voice carrying a mix of hesitation and vulnerability. Tyler looked up from his plate, his expression calm, his gaze attentive. "What is it, Jessica?" he asked, his voice gentle, inviting her to continue. Jessica swallowed, her palms damp as she gathered her thoughts. "I've been feeling restless," she admitted, her voice quiet but firm. "It's not because of you, it's something inside me. Like there's something else I need to experience." Tyler's expression shifted, softening as he set his fork down and gave her his full attention. Jessica hesitated, searching for the right way to phrase what she needed to say. "I've been wondering if maybe, if we gave each other a little more freedom, it could be good for us. Not because I don't love you, I do, but because I think it might actually make our relationship stronger." She studied his face, anxiety churning in her gut, waiting for his reaction. For a long moment, Tyler remained silent. His expression was unreadable as he processed her words. Finally, he gave a slow nod, his voice steady but carrying an undertone she couldn't quite decipher. "So, you're saying you want to open things up?" Jessica's heart skipped. She nodded, barely able to find her voice. "Just for a little while. Just to see how it feels. I really think it could be good for us." Tyler's eyes stayed locked on hers, his expression still unreadable. Then, he leaned back in his chair, arms resting against his chest. "I see," he said, his tone surprisingly even. "If that's what you need, Jessica, I won't stop you." A wave of relief washed over her, but beneath it, something else stirred, an uneasy tension she hadn't expected. She had braced herself for pushback, maybe even an argument. Instead, Tyler had accepted it without hesitation. Almost too easily. He folded his arms, studying her with a look she couldn't quite place. Then, after a pause, his tone shifted slightly. "So, this freedom," he said, his voice measured, "I assume it works both ways." Jessica froze. A sharp jolt of realization coursed through her. In all her thinking, all her justifications, she had been so focused on her own desire to explore that she hadn't considered what this might mean for Tyler. She had assumed he would just accept it. That he would understand her need for something more. But now, as she met his gaze, she wasn't so sure. "Well, yes, I suppose," she said cautiously. "If that's something you'd want too." Her voice wavered slightly. Tyler nodded, his expression remaining steady, unreadable. "Thank you for being honest, Jessica. I think I understand what you're asking." He exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'm okay with it. I want you to be happy," he said, his voice calm, too calm. Jessica forced a smile, but it felt hollow, fragile. She had expected resistance. Maybe even a fight. Instead, Tyler had accepted it without question. And somehow, that left her feeling unsettled. As if the conversation she had meticulously planned had just slipped out of her control. A part of Jessica had wanted a reaction, something, anything, that would match the gravity of what they were discussing. But he gave her nothing. And somehow, that unsettled her more than if he had argued. "Thank you, Tyler," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. That really means a lot. Tyler offered a small smile, but there was something in his expression she couldn't quite read, something that made her chest tighten. It wasn't just agreement. It felt like he had come to a decision of his own. That thought lingered, creeping under her skin like an itch she couldn't quite reach. A few days later, Jessica and Brooke stepped into a neon-lit nightclub, a place they hadn't set foot in for years. The music pulsed beneath their feet, bodies moved in sync with the heavy beat, and flashes of color streaked through the dimly lit space. There was an energy in the air, a kind of reckless, untamed charge that sent a shiver down Jessica's spine. It made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in longer than she cared to admit. Brooke shot her a teasing grin. Well, look who finally decided to have a little fun, she called over the music. How does it feel? Jessica laughed, though there was an unsteadiness to it. Honestly? I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I told Tyler, and he just agreed. No questions, no arguments. He was so calm about it. Brooke's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Wow. Guess he's more open-minded than I gave him credit for. See? I told you, as long as you explained it right, he'd understand. Jessica nodded, but a small crease formed between her brows. Yeah, but it almost felt too easy. Like, no hesitation whatsoever. Brooke chuckled, shaking her head. That's because he's already thinking about his own options too. Trust me, men like to act unfazed, but I guarantee he's got his own plans brewing. Don't overanalyze it, Jessica. This is going to be good for both of you. Jessica tried to ignore the unease tightening in her stomach. She inhaled deeply and forced a smile. And what about you? She asked, steering the conversation away from herself. Does your husband know you're here tonight? For just a fraction of a second, Brooke hesitated before giving a casual shrug. Oh, he's off on some hiking trip with his buddies. We've got an understanding, no questions, just trust. Jessica raised an eyebrow. So he doesn't care where you go or who you're with? Brooke laughed, waving off the concern as if it were nothing. She grabbed Jessica's hand, tugging her toward the bar. Come on, Jessica. Honesty is great, but he doesn't need to know every little detail. This is about freedom. A flicker of doubt crossed Jessica's mind, but before she could dwell on it, Brooke had already ordered them drinks. She lifted her glass, eyes gleaming with excitement. To freedom and new adventures. Jessica hesitated only a second before clinking her glass against Brooke's. She took a slow sip, the alcohol burning warm in her chest, smoothing out the edges of her nerves. For tonight, she decided to let herself enjoy the moment. Laughing, she let Brooke pull her onto the dance floor, the pounding music vibrating through her bones as they lost themselves in the rhythm of the crowd. Not long after, Jessica felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find a familiar face, Travis, a colleague she had known for years. But under the flickering lights of the club, he looked different. More confident. More dangerous. Jessica, he said, a smirk playing at his lips. Didn't expect to run into you here. She returned his smile, feeling a strange thrill spark inside her. I could say the same about you. Travis introduced his friend to Brooke, and soon, the four of them were deep in conversation, their laughter mingling with the bass-heavy music. With each round of drinks, Jessica felt the tension inside her begin to unravel. The weight of her doubts, the nagging unease, all of it dulled into the background. She let herself relax. Let herself get caught up in the moment. As the night wore on, the group naturally split into pairs, each person drifting to their own corner of the crowded space. Jessica and Travis ended up in a quieter spot, their conversation growing more personal, more intimate. This feels different, Travis murmured, his voice low as the space between them shrank. I've never seen you like this before. A flutter stirred in Jessica's stomach, a blend of excitement and nerves, both unfamiliar and thrilling. I guess I feel different tonight, she admitted, her voice barely rising above the steady pulse of the club. It was a simple response, but in that moment, it felt undeniably true. Everything that followed seemed effortless, as if the choice had already been made long before either of them acknowledged it. They left the club together, laughter slipping between them as they stepped into the cool night air. The city lights shimmered overhead, stretching their shadows across the pavement. Neither hesitated. Neither second-guessed. They simply moved forward, as though this moment had always been waiting for them. A short cab ride later, they arrived at a modest motel on the outskirts of town. No words were needed. They stepped inside together, their intentions clear. For Jessica, the night felt like a doorway swinging open, a glimpse into the freedom she had been craving, now finally within reach. But when morning arrived, with sunlight filtering through the thin curtains, the thrill of the night had already started to dim. What remained was something else entirely, a strange blend of satisfaction and uncertainty. Dressing quietly, she cast a glance at Travis, who still slept soundly beside her. She had gotten what she wanted, hadn't she? She had chased after excitement, broken free from the routine she had come to resent. Yet, as she stepped out into the crisp morning air, something gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. Tyler. His calm, unreadable expression lingered in her mind, and for the first time, she wondered if she had miscalculated. Jessica arrived home to an unsettling kind of silence, the kind that didn't feel quite right. By now, Tyler should have been up, sipping his coffee, going through the usual motions of his morning routine. But today, the house felt different. Empty. Almost hollow. A wave of unease tightened around her chest as she moved from room to room, the bedroom, the kitchen, even a quick step outside to check the backyard. No sign of him. Frowning, she reached for her phone and dialed his number. After a few rings, he answered, his voice steady but distant. "Hey, Jessica. What's up?" Relief washed over her, but it came with an undercurrent of guilt. "Where are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "I didn't see you this morning." "At the office," he replied, his tone detached. "A new project came in. It's going to keep me busy for a while, probably through the weekend." Jessica exhaled, her shoulders loosening slightly. A strange mix of relief and something heavier settled over her. "Oh, okay. I was just wondering since you weren't here." "Everything's fine, Jessica," he reassured her. "Just a lot to handle right now. I'll be home by dinner." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it, the unease still sitting in her stomach. "All right. Take care." The call ended, but the strange feeling remained. That evening, as the last traces of sunlight dipped below the horizon, casting the house in warm, golden hues, Jessica heard the familiar sound of Tyler's footsteps at the door. She met him with a smile as he stepped inside, setting his briefcase down by the entryway. "Long day?" she asked, mirroring his tired smile. "You could say that," he murmured, heading straight for the kitchen. She watched as he poured himself a glass of water, his movements slow, measured. There was a quiet deliberation in the way he carried himself, and Jessica found herself studying his face, searching for something, some hint of what he was thinking. But his expression remained unreadable. His calmness felt almost too controlled. Testing the waters, she spoke, keeping her tone casual. "So," she started, leaning against the counter, "how do you feel about everything?" Tyler looked up from his glass, one brow lifting slightly. "Everything," he repeated, his voice even, unreadable. Jessica gave a small, almost sheepish smile, feeling her nerves creep in. "You know, this open marriage thing. Has it meant anything to you? Are you getting anything out of it?" Tyler set his glass down, his fingers resting against the counter as he considered her words. "Honestly, I haven't really had time to think about it," Tyler admitted, exhaling as he leaned back against the counter. "This project's been taking up all my energy. Maybe once things settle down, I'll have a better sense of where I stand on all that." A flicker of disappointment ran through Jessica, though she quickly smothered it with a nod. Yeah. I get that. Tyler shrugged, then smoothly steered the conversation in a different direction. But enough about me, he said, his tone shifting into something more direct. What about you? Didn't you and Brooke go out the other night? Jessica's pulse ticked up a notch. For a brief moment, she considered telling him about Travis, but the words never made it past her lips. Instead, she kept her answer vague. Yeah, just some drinks, a little dancing. Ended up crashing at Brooke's place. She kept her tone light, casual. But Tyler's expression remained unreadable. And how did it make you feel? He asked, his voice even. But there was something underneath it. Something searching. Is this really what you wanted? Jessica hesitated, then answered before she could second-guess herself. Actually, yeah, Tyler. I feel good. Like I've got this energy again. A spark I haven't felt in years. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his eyes, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. But just as quickly, it was gone. He nodded slowly. Well, I'm happy for you, Jessica, he said, his voice smooth, measured. Jessica forced a smile in return, but his calm, almost indifferent approval unsettled her. She had expected some kind of reaction, maybe frustration, maybe even a tinge of jealousy. But his quiet acceptance made her feel as if she had missed something. Like she had just lost a game she didn't even realize she was playing. Over the next few days, Jessica found herself glued to her phone, caught up in a whirlwind of texts with both Travis and Brooke. Travis was flirtatious, charismatic, and eager to relive their night together. He kept hinting at a party he was throwing that weekend, something he promised would be unlike anything she'd ever experienced. He insisted she bring Brooke along. Though part of her was intrigued, something inside her hesitated. She needed more details. Dialing Brooke's number, she tapped her fingers restlessly on the counter, nerves and excitement tangling together in her stomach. Brooke picked up almost instantly. Hey, Jessica. You all set for tomorrow? Jessica chuckled, though the sound had a slight edge to it. Almost. I wanted to ask you about Travis's party. He's been hyping it up, but it sounds different. Oh, it'll be different, Brooke said with a knowing laugh. Travis throws the kind of parties people don't forget. Jessica hesitated for a beat before shifting gears. What about Tyler? He's been acting so distant lately, burying himself in work. I can't tell if he's really okay with all this or just too distracted to care. Brooke let out a light laugh, but there was something behind it, something teasing, almost smug. Oh, come on, Jessica. He's probably using work as a cover. Maybe he's already making his own moves. Men hate admitting they're doing the same thing. It's like they want us to believe they're above it all. A flicker of something, jealousy, doubt, rose inside Jessica, but she swallowed it down. Maybe you're right. I just wish he'd show something. Anything. Brooke's tone softened, though it still carried that confident, dismissive ease. Forget about Tyler for a night. Just let go. Trust me, you need this. Travis's party is exactly the kind of escape you're looking for. Jessica felt her hesitation begin to unravel, curiosity replacing caution. The thrill of something new pulled at her. All right, she said, though a small voice in her head still held back. Then, after a pause, she added, Brooke, when you say, fun, what exactly do you mean? Brooke's voice took on a playful, mischievous edge. Let's just say you might pick up a few new terms. Ever heard of Milk Brothers or Captain's Wheel? Jessica blinked, a mix of intrigue and embarrassment heating her cheeks. Captain's Wheel? What's that? Brooke laughed, rich with amusement. Oh, you'll see. Let's just say it requires a little teamwork. Get ready for a night you won't forget. Jessica felt her pulse quicken, anticipation curling through her like a slow-burning fuse. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating. This was exactly what she had been craving. And she was finally ready for it. By the time Saturday night rolled around, Jessica had her story rehearsed. She told Tyler she'd be out with Brooke, keeping it casual, just another girls' night, nothing out of the ordinary. Tyler barely glanced up from his laptop, his focus locked on whatever had been consuming his time for days. Have fun, Jessica. Don't worry about me, I'll be buried in this project all night. A wave of relief passed through her. All right, she replied, keeping her tone light. Just don't overdo it, okay? He offered a distracted smile, his eyes never fully meeting hers. And then, as she stepped out the door, anticipation surged through her veins. Tyler's calm indifference almost felt like permission. For the first time in a long time, she was stepping into something unknown. Travis's house was even more impressive than she had expected. A warm glow spilled from the backyard, reflecting off the glistening surface of the pool. Music pulsed through the night air, blending with the hum of laughter and lively conversation. As Jessica and Brooke made their way inside, she quickly realized the party was far bigger, and wilder, than she had imagined. Dozens of unfamiliar faces moved through the space, drinks in hand, their energy infectious. Travis spotted them almost instantly, his grin widening as he waved them over. Jessica. Glad you made it. His voice carried over the noise, warm and inviting. He pulled Brooke into a quick hug before turning back to Jessica, his eyes gleaming with mischief. By the way, he added with a chuckle, the pool's fair game tonight. Did you bring a swimsuit? Jessica blinked in surprise. No. I didn't know there was a pool. Travis shrugged, his smile never faltering. No problem. Underwear works fine. Or, he added with a playful wink, you could always go without. No judgments here. A slow flush crept up Jessica's neck. Brooke, completely unbothered, kicked off her shoes and tossed her purse onto a lounge chair. Come on, Jessica, she called, grinning as she dove in with a splash. Jessica hesitated. Before she could overthink it, Travis handed her a drink. She took it, letting the alcohol burn away her nerves. The atmosphere was intoxicating, light, carefree, charged with a sense of reckless abandon. It reminded her of college. Of nights where rules didn't exist. Where the only thing that mattered was the moment. The music thumped. Bodies moved in sync with the beat. Laughter came easy. Drinks flowed. Conversations blurred. And before long, Jessica found herself swept up in the energy of the night. What started as harmless fun quickly shifted into something more daring. Laughter turned into flirtation. Playful dares escalated into something far more intimate. Dance partners changed hands. Touches lingered. Boundaries blurred. The limits Jessica had assured herself would stay in place were slipping away, dissolving into the haze of the party. Brooke, ever in her element, leaned effortlessly into the wild energy of the night. Around them, the music surged, the lights cast a hazy glow, and teasing glances grew heavier with suggestion. Then, suddenly, Travis was beside her. His arm draped lightly around her waist, his breath warm against her ear. So, Jessica, he murmured, his voice smooth, familiar. Ready for a new experience? His touch was easy, his gaze laced with an invitation she had been flirting with all night. Jessica's pulse quickened. The party had drawn her in, wrapped her in its electricity. But now, standing on the edge of something more, she hesitated. She had spent weeks chasing this feeling. Craving the thrill of something new. And yet. I think so, she murmured. Though there was a waver in her voice. A hesitation she hadn't expected. Around them, the crowd began to thin, small groups splintering off into quieter corners of the house. Jessica found herself among a circle of strangers. Voices hushed. Laughter softer. The energy shifting into something heavier. More intimate. Across the room, Brooke caught her eye and lifted her glass in a silent toast. As if to say, this is it. Just let go. But suddenly, something inside Jessica shifted. The thrill she had been chasing, the one that had seemed so exhilarating in her mind, felt different now. The hands reaching for her. The voices urging her forward. The warmth of Travis's body, lingering too close. It wasn't excitement anymore. It was something else. Something heavier. Jessica took a step back, drawing in a slow, steady breath. Actually, I don't think I'm ready for this. Not yet. Her voice was soft, but there was no wavering in it. A few people exchanged knowing glances, some nodded in quiet understanding, while others looked mildly disappointed. Travis, to his credit, offered a small, patient smile. He brushed his fingers lightly against her arm in a way that was meant to be reassuring. "That's okay, Jessica," he said gently. "Sometimes it just takes time." But Brooke wasn't so quick to let it go. "Come on, Jessica," she coaxed, her voice tinged with amusement. "You were having fun. Just relax. You'll love it if you give it a chance." Jessica shook her head, her discomfort now unmistakable. "I really can't, Brooke. I just need more time." Travis shot Brooke a knowing look before squeezing Jessica's shoulder. "It's fine," he said smoothly. "Jessica should go at her own pace. Besides," he added with a playful smirk, "there are plenty of other people here who'd be happy to keep you entertained." Brooke rolled her eyes but didn't press the issue, quickly getting swept back into the energy of the party. The night raged on, growing wilder. But Jessica no longer felt like she belonged. She slipped into an empty room, shutting the door softly behind her. For the first time that night, she could hear herself think. The sounds of the party became muffled, distant. She poured herself a glass of wine, took a slow sip, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. And then, without meaning to, her thoughts drifted back to Tyler. To the way he had barely reacted when she told him about her night out. To that unreadable look in his eyes. To the calmness that didn't feel like calm at all. Had she misread him? Had she been so caught up in chasing excitement that she failed to see what was right in front of her? A slow, creeping doubt settled in her chest. Hours passed, and the party began to wind down. The crowd thinned, the lights dimmed, and voices lowered to hushed murmurs as people trickled out into the early morning air. Brooke, still glowing with the high of the night, eventually found Jessica sitting alone and nudged her playfully. "Hey. You good? You disappeared on me." Jessica forced a smile, but it felt fragile. "Yeah. I don't think this is really my thing." Brooke laughed, shaking her head. "You just need a warm-up. Next time, you'll feel right at home." Jessica didn't respond. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted there to be a next time. By the time she left, the first light of dawn had begun creeping into the sky. The drive home was silent, the only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the flicker of streetlights passing overhead. But Jessica's mind was anything but still. For weeks, she had convinced herself this was what she wanted. That this was what she needed. But now, all she could think about was the question she had spent all night avoiding. What had Tyler been doing while she was at the party? And for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. When Jessica stepped inside, a heavy silence greeted her. The darkness felt different tonight, thicker, colder. She exhaled, assuming Tyler had already gone to bed. But as she made her way upstairs, a strange chill crawled up her spine. Something was off. Her breath caught the moment she stepped into their bedroom. The bed was untouched. Perfectly made. Too neat. Too empty. A wave of unease crept over her as her eyes darted toward the closet. Several of Tyler's clothes were missing. The comforter from his side of the bed, gone. A tight panic gripped her chest. Then, her gaze landed on the nightstand. Her stomach dropped. A neatly stacked pile of papers sat waiting for her. She stepped forward, her hands trembling as she picked them up. The bold, unrelenting letters at the top of the page sent a shock wave through her. Divorce. The word practically screamed at her from the document, yet her mind refused to process it. Her vision blurred, and a strangled whisper slipped from her lips. This can't be happening. And suddenly, everything clicked. Tyler's eerie calm. His quiet nods when she had brought up the open marriage. He hadn't been agreeing. He had been waiting. Her fingers scrambled for her phone before she even realized what she was doing. She dialed his number, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Voicemail. She tried again. The call rang and rang. No answer. And just like that, Tyler was gone. The fallout. In the days that followed, Jessica's desperation only grew. She left voicemail after voicemail. Sent text after text. Each one more frantic than the last. But nothing came back. No response. No explanation. It was as if he had disappeared completely. Then, at last, a message arrived. But it wasn't from Tyler. The text came from his lawyer. Cold. Formal. Impersonal. The message was clear. Tyler was done. No conversation. No discussion. Just finality. And just when she thought things couldn't possibly get worse. They did. At work, the shift was immediate. The friendly nods. The warm smiles. Gone. Conversations came to a halt when she passed by. The familiar faces of her colleagues now held something else. Judgment. It didn't take long to find out why. Tyler had gathered everything. Her texts with Travis. The photos. Even the details of that party. Somehow, it had all found its way into company whispers, spreading like wildfire. And her employer, strict, conservative, intolerant of scandal, acted swiftly. The summons to her supervisor's office was immediate. Their expression unreadable. But the disappointment in their voice unmistakable. Jessica was informed that her conduct was under review. Her career, the job she had spent years building, was slipping through her fingers. And the nightmare was far from over. The courtroom. By the time her court date arrived, Jessica felt like a ghost, drifting through her own life in a daze. She sat motionless in the courtroom, numb as Tyler's meticulous preparation unraveled before her. Evidence. Private texts. Photos. Surveillance records from a private investigator, detailing her outings with Brooke, her flirtations with Travis, even her presence at that infamous party. It was all laid bare. Dissected. Piece by piece. With nowhere to hide. What had once felt exhilarating now seemed reckless. Naive. Tyler had been watching. Not with anger. Not with desperation. With precision. And now, every detail of her betrayal was being used against her. This wasn't just between them anymore. It was public. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Nothing was off limits. Every message. Every night out. Every lie. She wasn't just losing her marriage. She was losing everything. Then came the final blow. Her job. Gone. Travis. Also fired. His reputation destroyed alongside hers. And then, the one thing she hadn't seen coming. Tyler had sent everything to Patrick. Brooke's husband. And the truth hit like a wrecking ball. Brooke's so-called understanding with Patrick. It had been a lie. He hadn't known. He hadn't agreed. And the moment he found out, he filed for divorce. The fallout was swift. Friendships crumbled. Alliances shattered overnight. The once admiring crowd that had embraced Brooke's boldness, they abandoned her just as quickly. Humiliated and seething, she cut Jessica out of her life completely. Blaming her. Blaming Tyler. Blaming everyone but herself. And just like that, Jessica was alone. The aftermath. The scandal spread like wildfire. Friends distanced themselves. Neighbors whispered. Even family, once supportive, now looked at her with quiet disappointment. She had thought she was chasing freedom. Instead, she had walked straight into a cage of her own making. And for the first time since it all began, she realized Tyler had never been the one trapped. She was. Meanwhile, Tyler became the image of grace. The wronged husband, handling his pain with quiet dignity. And Jessica? She became the villain of the story. After days of silence, Jessica finally managed to reach him. Tyler agreed to meet. She needed to see him. Needed to understand. They sat across from each other, the weight of everything pressing between them like an invisible wall. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand. "Tyler, please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake. A huge one. I thought this would bring us closer. Help us understand each other better. I was only with Travis once, and at the party, I couldn't even go through with it. Please, forgive me." Tyler exhaled slowly. His gaze was heavy. Unshaken. "Jessica," he said, his voice measured, unreadable. When someone suggests an open marriage, it usually means they've already made up their mind. Her heart clenched. "The marriage was already broken," he continued. "You just didn't realize it." She swallowed hard, her breath uneven. "You weren't honest with me," he said, his voice unwavering. "You wanted both worlds. Wanted to explore, but didn't want to lose me. You kept secrets. And that's where the real damage happened." Jessica looked away, shame tightening in her chest. Because he was right. She had lied. She had hidden things. And in doing so, she had shattered the foundation of their marriage. Tyler sighed, rubbing a hand over his face before running it through his hair. "I wanted this to end cleanly. Maybe I went too far. Maybe it seems cruel. But the moment you started keeping things from me, that's when I knew we were done." His gaze met hers. His expression had softened. But there was no warmth. No anger. Just finality. "I don't think we can fix this, Jessica. I just don't." And in that moment, she knew. It was over. That night, as Jessica drove home, the world outside blurred into streaks of headlights and neon glows. She had spent so much time chasing something new. Something thrilling. Convinced it would make her feel alive. Instead, she had unraveled everything. Her marriage. Her career. Her friendships. Her own sense of self. And now, she had nothing. Choices have consequences. She had learned that the hard way. And sometimes, those consequences leave you with nothing but regret. As she pulled into the empty driveway, she let out a shaky breath, closing her eyes. She didn't know if she would ever find forgiveness. Or peace. But for now, all she had was this moment. And the weight of everything she had lost.